I'm so delighted to be able to announce our next speaker, Chris Coyier. Many of you will know Chris from around on the internet. He's been, I don't want to call him old, but he's been around there for a while. Sorry, Chris, I don't know. He was absolutely behind so many of the resources that have taught me so much throughout my web development career. CSS Tricks has become this canonical reference for all kinds of content, all kinds of things to do with web development. I'm always baffled at how quickly, after something new comes along, Chris is able to grasp it, see its importance, learn about it, produce content that is just so valuable for everyone, and that has incredible longevity and just kind of sticks around. So it's kind of staggering to see. Chris is going to come and talk to us now about the power of the all-powerful front-end developer, and that makes me happy because that's my background. So please make him very, very welcome. It's Chris Coyier.
Yeah. No, you don't need that. You're set.
Okay. Wow, that was so nice. That was the nicest introduction I ever got. Ever. Yeah. Ooh, flashlight. All-powerful front-end developer. I've been a front-end developer for a long time, and it's very near and dear to my heart, and it's so cool what's happening, and that front-end developers are just getting so much more powerful in what we can do, and this is what we're going to talk about for half an hour. It's going to be awesome. I work at CodePen and do CSS Tricks and Shop Talk Show as well. Why does it say bookmark this page? Isn't that weird? You can see that? Whatever. That's annoying enough to fix. There it goes. You want to read my email too? There's some in there. Cool. So, before any of the stuff that we're going to talk about today, front-end developers have already been super powerful. We always had a super important role in the construction of websites. Okay, next slide. Go, buddy. All of UX, as important as UX is, it's the most important thing we can possibly deal with when making a website. What is it like for the users to use? The front-end developer crafts all of it. It's totally in our hands what the experience of using a website is like. Performance, that's on front-end developers primarily. A big chunk of perf is a front-end development situation. All of accessibility, and people can, you can have specialists think about UX and wireframe stuff and do research, but the putting it into a website is all front-end developers, just like accessibility. That's in front-end developers' hands. The execution of a design and integrating the animations and interactions and all that stuff, that's all front-end development work. That's incredible. We have so much work to do already, front-end developers, that you can make a sweet career out of it, and lots of people are doing it, and I love it. I've done it, and I just think, wow, what a cool job. I have the best job in the world, being a front-end developer. And there's a certain skill set that comes along with the job. Certainly those things, it's generally some of those things, you specialize in some of them, whatever, you add a few things to that party. But there is some kind of roadblock eventually. That's the point. You're a front-end developer, which means that you don't have some other skills, probably. So there's some kind of roadblock to your front-end development skills where you're okay, my skill set has expired and now I need somebody else to help me. And this talk is kind of about where is that and where is it changing, and I'm kind of interested in just fucking kicking it down. I don't need anybody's help anymore. I can do everything, which I love. So there's some kind of I don't know. When does it stop? Generally it stops when you need some hardcore back-end help or server ops kind of stuff. At least that's been the case for me. So if you don't need any servers, well, I don't know why this word hasn't come up as much at this conference, but I feel like it's just as buzzwordy as Jamstack is to some degree. So I'm going to say it a whole bunch just unapologetically, and I'm not even going to give some caveat that's well, there's still servers involved, blah, blah, blah. I'm not even going to do it. I made a website called thepowerofserverless.info that is just a bunch of links and stuff, so don't worry about jotting down links and stuff. If we talk about some service, it's up on this microsite that's kind of related to this talk. So let's look at one of the major ingredients of I'd say Jamstack, but definitely of serverless, which is this whole idea of cloud functions. They're so cool. It's some JavaScript, and you put it on a server, but not your server, somebody else's server. Which is great. And it's probably Node. It doesn't have to be, but it probably is, especially for the people in this room. And then you got a website, and all you need to know is that you execute that code by hitting a URL of some kind. You hit the URL, the code runs. That's all that a cloud function is. It sounds boring, but it's cool. Why would you ever do that? Well, let's not be abstract about it. Let's talk about real reasons why you would do it. Let's say your boss is okay, we work at food.recipes or I don't know, You work on a recipe site, and you're tasked with, we need to like have an input field, and you type in your phone number, and you get the recipe on your phone. It's like a feature that you're tasked with building. So if you're like a front-end developer, you're like, I got this. I can design it. I can do the UX for it. I can build the form. I can think about the states. I can do all this work. But at some point, my front-end development, I'm done, and I got to kick it over the fence to somebody who can like go the last mile and make it do the actual thing of sending a text message. That's the roadblock that we're going to kick over. We're going to be like, okay, Twilio, that's the app that you use to send text messages. Cool, got it. That's the thing I'm a little afraid of. Like, I don't know how to do that. It seems like back-end nerd stuff. This is where my front-end skills expire and somebody else comes to help me. Like I said, this is what we're gonna scratch out. So how do we do it? Well, it's not because Twilio announced that they have client-side only APIs and we can just do it in the browser. They don't have that. They don't have that on purpose because you need API keys to deal with your Twilio account, because if the API keys are the keys to the kingdom. If some bad person slides in here and steals your API keys for Twilio, they're gonna fucking text all of Texas to vote for Ted Cruz. Or something that you don't want. Something bad is gonna happen to you if they get your API keys. That's why you need to protect them behind server-side code. That's a traditional use case of why you need a server. I need to protect my API keys. You just have to do that. You can't protect them client-side. I need a server to do this in some way. It's not the case for all APIs. Flickr's got an API. You can use it to search for pictures. You don't need any API keys. You don't need a server for this. This is all happening client-side. This also makes you powerful as a front-end developer, but it's not going to help us in the Twilio situation. So we're going to use a server, but not really. We're going to use somebody else's server. And we're going to do it this way. So that's our little cloud, what a cloud function is, diagram. We're going to write our little JavaScript code. We're going to put it on somebody else's server, and we're going to communicate with that via URLs, the web's finest feature. So if we're going to run some JavaScript code and we need to put it on a server somewhere or whatever, why can't we just use the one that's already powering our recipe website? Like, why not? Well, because this is why not. Because our server doesn't run anything in the background. So we maybe could if it was like an old school server that we don't have, but no, we jam stacking, baby. Our server don't have Node on it on purpose. Let's say our recipe website is running on GitHub Pages or CodePen projects, or obviously Netlify is the choice here, or I'm going to dump all that crap in an S3 bucket. Guess which backend languages none of those things have? All of them. That was complicated. None of those run any backend languages. You know, like GitHub Pages will not run your Python script. Netlify will not run your PHP function. CodePen projects will not run your Node JavaScript yet. So, but why would you choose those things? Because it's super cheap, it's super fast, it's CDN edge. Don't we call it CDN's edge now? I don't know why. They're super secure. There's no database to break into. There's no file permissions to set. That you get a HTTPS that you don't have to frickin' deal with. It's such a pain in the ass. They're just very front-end developer-friendly places to put your code. It's a fundamental kind of concept of this Jamstack stuff. That's where our recipe website lives, so that's why we don't have a place to run our little function to talk to Twilio. So let's serverless up. Serverless it up. This website, which I have no affiliation with or anything, it helped me understand what a cloud function is. So maybe this will be useful to you too. It's called webtask.io. It's a little bit like CodePen in that it's an editor in the browser. So I can open up webtask and I can actually edit that code and I can make a function. So here's just a function that takes some data, and when it's done doing whatever it's going to do, it calls a callback and returns that data. What's cool about webtask is I can test it right in there. I can press that run button and it'll run that function. So here I'm going to fake post to this piece of code, and I'm going to pass it some form data, foo bar, whatever, hit the run button, and I can see that it returns. I can even console.log stuff in there, and it returns a little piece of JSON for me to use. Cool, so now I have this like piece of node that I'm executing now. But that node is useless. The node code I want is I'm going to just go copy and paste some crap out of the Twilio docs, because that's how I need to send a text message. They'll have an npm lib that you can just grab. They'll have documentation that's just like, I don't know, fill in the blanks. You know, it's their job to make this easy for you to use. So here I've done it. I've just went to Twilio. I'm importing Twilio from Twilio. I don't even know what that lib does, but I'm just following the docs. You know, there's some API key stuff in there, and I'm just gonna, that's their documentation for how to send a text message. And then WebTest has a place to keep your secrets if you want to, so that the world kind of can't see them. But crucially, they give you a URL to hit it. That they give you that. Now I have a URL to run my function, which is great. Now I can use it, and this is cool, old school web. I can use this function with no client-side JavaScript at all. I can just have a form. I'm going to post to that URL that they just gave me, and I'm going to ask her a phone number to send it to, and just pass it some value to send or whatever, and it has a submit button, and that's it. So I can run that on CodePen. That's it. There's no CSS or JavaScript involved here at all. I just type in my own phone number there and never call me, and I'm just having it barf out. So, but I'm in Mac OS, so I have my iMessage set up or whatever, and it's working. It's hitting Twilio with that data, and it's sending me a text message. I put that together, and I have no business doing that. Which is great. And so you don't even have to have it spit out crap. I could have told that node function to redirect to some success page or something like that. It's probably more likely, though, that you'd have an event listener on your form, and you'd post to the URL that I said, and you'd send it some data and then wait for the response and do fancy animations on your page or whatever. That's probably a more likely scenario, but it's kind of cool that you can do it with progressive enhancement too. And this is what I did. I made a dumb little recipe website where you can type in the phone number and you get these lovely little recipe for oatmeal cookies. So that's totally part of Jamstack and serverless. But this can get harder and easier than that. Here's an example of it getting a lot easier. Let's say you need a form on your website that's something else, a contact form or something. I need back-end code to be able to deal with that. So what do you use? We're going to have to write a cloud function and protect our API keys and blah, 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 blah. Sure, you could do it like that, but you don't have to, because this is a super old need on the web. Like, people have needed to put forms on websites, and there's been startups to help them do that forever. So there's fucking Google Forms or whatever, and Wufoo and Typeform and FormStack and JotForm. There's a million apps to do this. I think, as old as these seem, this is a part of Jamstack too. If you ask me, this means somebody else deal with my forms. Let somebody else's servers and stuff that specialize in that be part of this website, and I don't need any back-end languages or anything else. I think that's part of this story as well. I can take a Wufoo form and have it work right on CodePen. It's just copy and paste code, and that's a fully functional payment-enabled form that I could host anywhere. But there's, a little bit more Jamstacky maybe, is this idea that you can just bring your own HTML form and then just point the action attribute at one of these other services. It's like a new breed of form processors. You just pass it that, and that's how form carry works, and page clip, and Netlify forms, of course, and Basin. There's all these new form processors that help you deal with forms as well. And these exist because this is a big deal, which is cool. So don't worry about any of those services. That's why this website, thepowerofserverless.info, exists, so that it rounds up all these services. There's a million of them. So let's say you need to take some money for your thing. E-commerce, I don't know, I give up. I'm just going to use Shopify or Magento, or I don't know. Do the kids these days know about Magento still? But you don't really have to. Like, how would you do Jamstacky e-commerce? How does that work? Well, there's a million ways to cut it, but the easiest way in the universe is just to use a buy now button. I have little scarves. Oh, well, here's all the players, right? We know them. They're literally all here in San Francisco. PayPal, I sell scarves. I'm going to put a freaking PayPal button on the thing. When they click it, they go to PayPal. They pay for the thing. They come back to my scarf website, and then PayPal tells me about it. So then I ship them the scarf or whatever. That's Jamstacky. I don't need any back-end languages to do this. I'm totally enabled as a front-end developer to have e-commerce on my website the oldest way in the book. Or you can get all fancy with it. This is a Sarah Dresner demo where she, works for Microsoft and on Azure and is on the Vue core team. This is a Vue demo where it's all fancy. It's got filtering and there's a cart, and she made up this whole e-commerce demo. But it also has a payment form on it. So look, as she filters, and it's all modern and fancy. And then you go to the cart, and the cart has items in it, but you can actually check out. And this isn't just totally faked. She integrated this with Stripe. So this is just using the fake Stripe credit card number, but this would actually work and process code. It's the same. It's all the proper code is there to do it. You pay with the credit card, and Stripe is communicated with. The card is actually processed, and it's doing all that kind of real e-commerce work. But there's no server here. This is still all Jamstacky, and the way that it works is that the back end is, or the front is Vue, the processing is Stripe, but the way that those two mix, because of course Stripe has API keys that you need to protect. You better as hell protect your Stripe API keys. They're communicated with Cloud Functions, in this case on Azure. So Stripe, again, they want to help you do this. The API docs for Stripe are incredible, you know, but it's you know, so you need to put it somewhere. So in this case, she's using Azure, and Azure has an interface. I think this is probably an oldish screenshot. I think it's been redesigned a little bit. But what's kind of cool about this is that in this case, you see how it's all kind of grayed out. Sarah put these in a GitHub repo. So her cloud functions are part of like the rest of her code base. It's just she's shipping them up to Azure here too. So you don't have to use an online editor for it. Your cloud functions can live in your repo along with all the rest of your code. Kind of cool, kind of cool. Just because we're talking about payments, I think this is worth knowing about, that browsers have this new thing called the Web Payment API, and the whole point of it isn't to like, they're not actually processing payments for you. What browsers are trying to give you here is free UI UX for checking out from pages. Like they'll be your shopping cart and your address collector and credit card information acceptor. It's this piece that they're trying to give you, and that's so cool, because it's consistent across sites then, and they'll, you know, the people have their saved addresses and saved credit cards and stuff. But it's just the UI UX. You still need to bring your own payment processing, so you still need stuff like, you know, serverless functions to process your Stripe calls and all that kind of stuff. But it's worth knowing about, because I think that's some future web stuff that works nicely in a Jamstack situation. So here's another one. Let's say you need comment threads. This might be a moment where you're like, yeah, Jamstack's cool, but I literally need comments on my website. So what am I going to do about that? I'm just going to give up and use WordPress or something. But no, but comments are great structured data. They're great for databases. There's no reason to forsake databases because they're kind of perfect for stuff like this. You need their name and what article that comment was associated with, and the value of the comment, and when it happened, and whether it's approved or not. And it's great structured data. So sure, you could just reach for WordPress, but let's assume that you're going to use a static site generator. Instead, static site generators are so hot, I'm going to use Middleman or whatever. There's a bunch of them. They're all great. There's Hugo, and Gatsby's the cool one, right? And there's Hexo and Metalsmith and Jekyll and Middleman, and Eleventy is the new hot one, isn't it? So, but you don't, you know, they don't have like comment threads, aren't like a native feature of any of these things. So in the way that they generally work is, you know, the content lives in your repo. It's a big pile of markdown files. Actually, I had an interesting conversation last night where it's not necessarily that. It's just anything that returns a promise kind of thing. It was an interesting conversation, but so it wouldn't necessarily need to be a bunch of markdown files. It could hit your Contentful API or something, but still statically generate. Total aside there, but it smashes all that together with some templates, and it makes like a directory that's a website, like a bunch of files that you could put anywhere. You could put it in your S3 bucket or let Netlify run it for you or whatever. They all work the same way, but none of them really have comments as a feature. So what are we to do? Well, we don't really have a database at our command, so let's just put Discus on it. Which is fine, and it solves, you know, that comes with its own can of worms, but that's been like solving that problem for us forever, and as such is kind of part of the Jamstack universe in a way. But like, let's really nerd this one up. Like, let's go full bore nerd on the comment thread thing. Let's want to roll our own system. So we're going to use Hugo, because Hugo's cool, right? That's our static site generator. We're going to put a comment form on it where we collect their name and their email and what comment. And when you click the button, it's going to turn into a piece of like structured data. We'll just format it as JSON, and we'll throw it up in Firebase, because Firebase is great for that. It's basically JSON based. We can just throw our, you know, I know there's more to it than this. I'm being abstract on purpose, but we'll keep that data in Firebase. Well, it could be spam, it could be garbage, so we're going to have when that happens, and of course we'll do this through a cloud function, you know, the function will also hit Slack, and Slack will have a channel, and it'll say, do I approve or disapprove this message? And if you say disapprove, it maybe just does nothing. But if it hits approve, then maybe that cloud function then can hit Netlify and trigger a build. That'd be kind of cool. And during that build, we'll have Hugo go get all approved comments from that post and do it in the build process. So now we have a comment thread The data is stored in a database, kind of where it's nice to keep things like comments, but we can still statically generate our site. Like that's a kind of flow that is just cool and Jamstacky and serverlessy and just kind of sweet and a little bit like that. Just things around, but it's kind of sweet. That's Phil's version. Phil's is cool. Phil's doesn't use this. It uses like the Netlify, like kind of, you know, when you use Netlify forms, it just uses Netlify as a database, kind of. Kind of cool. So what about real life cloud functions? Like these were all little hobbyist kind of things, but clearly sites use them all the time. CodePen uses the crap out of cloud functions. Here's one of the things we use cloud functions for. You can write in a bunch of different preprocessor languages on code, like your HTML. You can write in or any of these other languages. Your CSS, you can write in popular CSS preprocessor languages. JavaScript too, we will process for you in a number of different ways. We could, and we have re-architected this many times throughout the life of CodePen, but we've really settled on cloud functions as a way to do this because it's sweet. So all these languages are written in Node, which is a thing that Lambda, which is another cloud services provider, can run. So we have little cloud functions whose whole job on earth is to take some less CSS and turn it into CSS and return it. That's its own, that's all it does in the world. It's its own little job. And then there's a couple other languages out there that, you know, Sass, there's Dart Sass these days, which you haven't explored, but there's some other languages that just don't run in a language that cloud functions can generally run. For whatever reason, cloud functions don't love Ruby. Who knows? But like in the world of CodePen, the ones that are on the left side of this screen are certainly kind of happier, you know, that they're cheaper, they're easier to secure, they're easier to scale. They don't break that often. It's not like the stuff on the right is untenable. Like we can manage it. That's the business that we're in. But certainly, if you can run it as a cloud function, oh, your life just gets so much easier and better and less expensive and stuff. It's great. All right, let's do another one just because we can. Let's say you need to build a CRM. Like your boss is like, hey, bro, can you build me like an app to like track our customers and like if they got a gift box or not for Christmas? And you'd be like, yes, boss, I can. It's like, no, like an app, you know? And you're like, yes, I can build you that app, you know? But anyways, like, no, like, let's do it for real. Like, we got to build a CRUD app, you know? Create, read, update, delete, like every app that most of us write. We all write CRUD apps all day long. We're going to need some structured data for our customers and whether they got a gift box or not, fine. Where should we put that? It'd be kind of rad to use Airtable. I don't know if any of you have seen this, but it's a great little app. It's spreadsheet-like based. They have a great UI, which is just cool on its own, but they have JSON APIs for all that data. So if we're running just a cheap, easy solution like that, we're going to make a little CRUD app. Using Airtable is great for that, but Airtable also has API keys that you probably don't want to put in your client-side JavaScript. You can, but not great. You know, this is like your private data. Airtable has also great APIs. They run Node. You can make a cloud function that does all the CRUD stuff for Airtable and pull and push data, like, oh, they got their gift box or whatever. That's a perfect use case for cloud functions. This is another Sarah Dresner demo where she made her and her team speak at all these events. So she made this crazy WebGL globe of where they're speaking and when and all this stuff. But you can run this anywhere. You could run this on a Jamstack thing because the way that she did it was basically built a little CRUD app. The data store in this case is just a JSON file, but she made a little UI for adding and updating stuff that run cloud functions in Azure in this case, and then it's a Vue app again on the front end. Let's say you want to build a blog. Like, do you have to run a static site generator on Jamstack to have a blog, or is there other ways to do it? Of course, there's other ways to do it. It's just structured data, and this is this is worth googling. We won't get into a whole bunch, but Kit Hodgson made this for us on CodePen, which is a way to spin up a blog and totally serverlessly, so you can run it on CodePen, which has no database or backend functions or back-end languages, remember. But here's, like Monica was talking about, here's how easy Firebase auth is. It's like 2 lines of code. You're like, oh, cool, now I have login for my app. Great, and now that I'm logged in and authenticated, I can write posts. And so now I'm writing a post, and it's going to turn that data into JSON, send it up to Firebase, and now I have a new blog, and it persists in the cloud, right? You refresh this page, that blog post that I just authored will be there. So a serverless blog, how cool is that? and did it all on CodePen. This got me empowered too. I'm like, I'm going to make a food log. I could download one of 2 billion of them on my phone or whatever, but I'll write one myself just to see if I can do it. So I use Firebase. I have auth now. I type in what food I ate, what calories, and it saves it to Firebase, and it stores it by date and adds up the calories for me and all that stuff. That's so empowering. That is me kicking down the door of what I'm able to do as a front-end developer, and it's badass, I think. Anyway, I just called myself a badass, which is not the case. So you want to send notifications for your app. We already talked about sending SMS, but what if you are running a bug tracker and it needs to send a Slack notice or an email notice or whatever? It's the same kind of thing. You build cloud functions that do that job. That's what this world is all about these days. You can make this work. That roadblock can be gone for you. How does Slack do it? Slack wants you to hit a URL too. You want to send a message to a Slack channel? They're just like, here's a URL, hit it with your data, and we'll do that for you. So you'd write a cloud function that hit their URL and does the job. You know, we're not looking at the code here. We're talking about empowerment, what you can do. There's sending email. There's things like Mailgun and SparkPost and SendGrid. They're just APIs for sending emails. What do you think we're going to do? We're going to they're going to give us some node code. We're going to put it in a cloud function, and now we have a URL that we can post to that will send an email. So now we have this bug tracker app that we're going with. So anyway, we talked about web tasks. That was a really easy way to get started with them and feel out what they are. We looked, Azure's got cloud functions. Firebase will run them. Google Cloud Functions, AWS Lambda is probably the biggest provider of them. And Netlify's got them, of course, too, which is really rad because it's so easy on Netlify. You just put your function.js in a folder called functions, kick it to your Netlify, and now at your website, like it just makes a relative URL that you can execute that function through Lambda. It's like the easiest way ever to get started with cloud functions. They really did a good job with that, which is cool. So it's another way to get started with cloud functions. How much is this stuff going to cost? I think this is funny. So for like 100,000 times, like if we hit our cloud function to send an email 100,000 times, and it ran for half a second each time, which is way longer than it'll take to run, and it uses 512 megabytes of RAM, which is way more than it'll ever need, we're looking at like 50 cents. So pretty affordable, I'd say, in the terms of this kind of stuff. It's not always the right answer, but for this kind of stuff, it's pretty no-brainery. It reminds you all watch Halt and Catch Fire. If you didn't, you should go home tonight and watch all of it, because it's the best show ever. But in like season 4, they kind of invent this concept in the 80s. They're like, these big computers are just sitting around doing nothing at night. We should have them run, we'll sell the time, the unused computer time, which is kind of what cloud functions are, I think. AWS has all these servers sitting around that are pre-bought and not doing anything. They're like, well, they are doing something. They're executing my cloud functions when I need them. Anyway, so look at now we're little architects. We have this bug tracker app or whatever that sends SMS messages, and it sends emails, and it sends Slack messages, and we've written cloud functions for each one of those things. Oh, but we found this cool abstraction mailer. So instead of using SparkPost APIs directly, we'll use this abstraction. That way, if we need to change providers, we can. And we're like, oh yeah, I'm totally going to use that. So now my mailer function isn't tied to SparkPost, but it's kind of an abstraction. Cool. And then, like, I don't know, it's weird to have our client be in charge of calling all these APIs directly. Why don't we write a cloud function that's like just a notifier, and we say, okay, notifier, I want you to send an SMS to this location. And so it can kind of be like a little router for all these things, just to give ourselves a little bit of abstraction in here. And all of a sudden we're like freaking architects all of a sudden. We haven't learned anything really, but all of a sudden we're like back-end developers too, which is great. So we got to close this thing down. It's half an hour. It's now out of breath, Serverless, it's this ingredient list. It's not like if you go serverless or you go Jamstack, you have to do all of it, but it can do all kinds of interesting things, and it's incremental adoption for days. You can just, ooh, that looks nice. I'll have one of these and one of these. It's not just for hobbyist things. It's not just for crazy enterprise sites. It's for everybody. It's amazing how I've seen usage of this serverless Jamstack stuff all across. It's not prescriptive in any type of website. There's very clearly people doing Jamstack for publishing of like lots of content, blog type stuff, publication type stuff, and clearly it's for web apps, whatever those things are. People are using the crap out of that stuff. So it's just everybody's using it in some way. The perf story is so great for it, especially on something like Netlify, where your whole site, like the document, will come back like that, and then the rest of it is like for you to screw up. And the security's so great. You know, that's one of the things I totally love about Jamstack is it's not like, oh my God, how am I going to secure this database? What file permissions should these PHP files be? Like where are bad guys knocking on the door of this website that I don't know about? I hate that stuff. I don't want that to be my job. My job has already gotten bigger as a front-end developer, and dealing with anything security related just isn't my favorite thing to do. So it's so nice that I can feel powerful and not worry about it. So the point of this isn't that everything that we've talked about at this conference is the best thing in the entire universe and you should do all of it immediately. It's about your brain knowing what's up and what's out there and being able to pick from that ingredients list when you can. It's great. Your brain is now smarter. That's the dumb little website I made, thepowerofserverless.info. I have the Twitter handle CSS now. How cool is that, right? Anyway, that's my whole talk. Thanks, everybody.